Farid, property ownership is a daunting experience. I've had to go through that recently, and I know you did too.
I did.
How was it for you?
I found the whole process to be incredibly, well, you said it right, daunting,
And scary.
incredibly complicated.
Yeah.
I felt like I was wading into an area of the unknown. I didn't know what I was getting into, but it had to be done.
Yes. And fortunately, we have an expert as our guest today to talk about the landmine of property ownership. And he is one of our colleagues who writes for StarProperty. But before we get to the podcast, here are some of our stories on TSOL, Star Online, and the Star, which you can check out today. The subject of tariffs is still hot for it. And the 140 something percent in tariffs, of which Trump says is still high, it might reduce, but obviously not to zero. And the other story is the rise of AI and deepfakes. A 16-year-old student in Johor was detained for doctoring images of his schoolmates. Now that's, also quite concerning and scary as well. Anyway, let's get to our topic at hand. Property ownership. We have today our colleague, Joseph Wong, who is content manager for
Senior content manager
for StarProperty. Welcome, Joseph. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, your insights will be very valuable. Farid, let's get the ball rolling.
Before we begin, Joseph, I would love for you if you could introduce yourselves to our listeners. Tell us a bit about what you do and your experience writing about property markets.
Well, I've joined StarProperty in 2019, just before the COVID. It was in July. The COVID actually, towards the end of the year, was when it started kicking in. And then it went full-blown in 2020. So at the time when I joined, I was a bit worried. I thought, how are we going to deal with this situation? Because obviously the property industry was greatly affected by the pandemic, along with a lot of other businesses. But as time went by, we noticed quite a lot of interesting things that happened. The property market changed quite tremendously during this time period as well, so which was quite exciting for the real estate industry. I covered property for a long time. That was in my previous job in Focus Malaysia. So I've about 13 years writing property, so I've seen over a decade worth of changes in the property industry.
Wow, so you're well versed enough to deep dive into this topic today, which is very important because home ownership, it is a major milestone in our culture, in the Malaysian culture.
Correct.
Why do you think that is, Joseph?
Well, for Malaysians, we have this Asian mentality that you must own a home, right?
Yeah.
But if you look into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Shelter is obviously one of the big three, along with food and water. But what I'm concerned about are the first-time homeowners when they buy into a property that they fall into quite a number of pitfalls. We actually made, what we did was we compiled the most generalized pitfalls that they fall into. So we have 5 common areas that they make when they buy a home.
But before we get into the 5 common pitfalls, Joseph, is it financially sound to buy property as a long-term investment in today's market? Let's talk about Klang Valley. Is it financially sound?
Well,
because there are some people who still prefer to rent. They don't want to drop that huge commitment on their lap.
Correct. Interestingly, that you mentioned this, there was actually a study by the government on why the Gen Y and the Gen Z were hesitating in buying property. The Gen X obviously all have already bought properties. They're towards the end of the property industry already. But for the Gen Y and Gen Z, they hesitate in buying property. But the question is whether it's worth to buy property now. I'll have to say yes, because if you look at inflation rates, our money will always be devalued over a certain time. But when you buy a property, it acts as a safeguard to maintain your future value of your property, and then you can obviously the price is going to go up. Then you can sell off and then balance everything out. So I will have to say yes, and on the other hand, I will also have to say no at the same time, because when you talk about financially stable, that is something that you have to look into before you actually buy a property. Before I bought my property, I was extremely financially stable. To give you an idea, I upgraded my vehicle, and I bought myself a newer car. And at that time, I didn't want to spend too much time paying off the loan.
Right.
And banks always offer you a 5-year loan. Minimum is 5-year loan for your higher purchase. So I did the mad thing. I actually bought my car on my credit card.
Wow.
So a lot of people are wondering, oh my God,
Why
the
did you do
interest
that?
rate is incredibly high for
Right.
for credit card. But I paid off my car in 11 months.
Mm-hmm.
So the savings I made was 4,700 if I've taken up my loan. So I was financially stable then, or rather debt-free at that time, until I bought my property. Then that's when the debt started piling up. And then at that time, you would say that I was a first-time home buyer. So I myself fell into that pitfall. And then as time went by, I realized, oh no. So we started writing stories, informing the public what to do and what not to do if you buy a home.
For me, when I bought my property in January 2024. I think I signed the sales and purchase agreement sometime in December 2023. And I remember up until that point, I had been looking around for a property to buy. I think about 2-3 years. I've been going to showrooms, I've been meeting with agents, trying to make sense of this whole world that I had no information about. And then I think a year or two before that, my sister had already bought a house. So I asked a lot of things from her. So she told me a bit about what to expect. But even then, I felt overwhelmed by the amount of information I saw on the internet.
It is overwhelming. And just for context, all three of us are in a different age group. Again, there is different aspects when buying property in your age group. Farid, you're in your 30s, I'm in my 40s, and Joseph, you're in your 50s, correct?
Correct.
Right. So, Farid, when you spoke about the complexities of buying a property, right? It really is really scary from my experience as well. But the important thing is talk to as many people as you can, right? Let's get into the pitfalls. Joseph, why don't you start us off?
Okay, we categorize into 5 areas for the pitfalls. I initially I put them into an order, but I think having looked at the common pitfalls, the probably number one thing is when you go to a bank to apply for a loan, don't accept the first offer you get, right? Don't just go to one bank. Go to different banks and then see what they have to offer. So this is something interesting that we discovered, that if you go to the same bank but in a different branch, you might get different offer.
That's
is-
interesting. I actually did not know that. I thought one bank, same offer, but you're saying, for example, Bank A, there's a branch in, wherever, PJ,
Correct.
Klang, Shah Alam. All three branches might offer you a different rate.
Correct. So it can be from the same bank, but each branch have a different hunger for loans.
Okay.
So that might offer you a different rate. And also you must remember, each of these banks, they have got different people working. So they have got different levels of expertise processing your loan. So bank A's KL branch might be more experienced than the Bank A's PJ branch. So the KL branch process it more efficiently, and therefore they look at your data, that all the information they provided to the bank, and they are able to offer you a better rate. Whereas the one in PJ might be a person who has lesser knowledge, and then they are more risk adverse, they might offer you a higher rate. So it really depends. So just because it's from the same bank, don't assume that the same bank is going to offer you the same rate. It can be different.
I did not know this because
Yeah,
when I
it's
bought
an
my
eye-opener.
property, my agent handled everything. And I feel like for a lot of people, that's probably the case.
Especially, okay, when it comes to agents, right, Joseph, this is especially true when you're buying new properties, right? For subsale, yes, it does happen. From my experience, because I've just bought it off a family member, so we did away with the agent. Yeah, so it just makes things a bit simpler.
Ooh, surprisingly, that's the other pitfall that we would advise first home buyers to work with agents or registered agents, not just agents. Don't just go to any agents. Make
Correct.
sure that they're registered, because
Yeah.
if they're not registered, anything that goes wrong, there's no protection.
Again, I did consult an agent before because I was looking at another property. But yes, you're right. Consult an agent and just get as much feedback as you can.
Correct, especially when it comes to secondary homes. If you're buying direct from the developer, yeah, you can forgo the agent, because there's no point going through an agency in that case. If you're going directly to the developer, then go straight to the developer. But if you're going to buy a secondary home, it's better to go to a registered agent or negotiator, because especially one who is familiar with the
Area?
area, and they'll be able to know whether the seller is offering you too high a price.
Right.
And then if the seller is not aware of the pricing in the area as well, they might not be able to give you a true price of the property you're interested in. And then if you make a lower offer based on the surrounding value of the properties, of similar properties, then that might become offended. So if you go through the agent or the negotiator, at least they will be able to provide data on what the actual value of the property is. And the other thing is also approach the bank as well, because obviously you can make an offer to the property owner. Now, from one of my experience when I was first looking for a property to buy, I was Googling online, and it was an agent that was selling on behalf of the seller. So I approached the agent, and then the asking price was at the time was 470,000 for a 2-bedroom place. And then I went to the bank and asked them for their valuation, and then they had that information available, and they said no, that property is not worth 470,000. That property is worth 430,000, which was the offer that I made to the agent. And the agent got really, really upset. And then he said to me, no, the bank that I go through says you can buy the property for 470. But as a buyer, why do I want to buy at 470 when the bank's value, but the bank that I go to, the valuation is 430? So in the end, I rejected and didn't go for it. But it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because the value of that property actually dropped down some more.
Really?
So sometimes it's good to take a step back and have a look, second look at the property later on.
What's the second pitfall?
That was the second before.
Oh,
is
that was
to,
the second.
to
Okay.
go through a registered property agent.
So first
or-
one is approach as
accept-
many banks as you
Yeah,
can.
Correct.
Second one is get a qualified registered property agent.
Correct.
Right.
And then the third pitfall is first home buyers always look at the wrong things.
Such as?
They'll look at, oh, it's a 3-bedroom place and you're only paying like under 500,000, for example, and you think, oh, that's a good offer, and then this property has like 72, 75, 80 facilities they can use.
Oh, well,
And-
so that means people often focus on the cosmetics, the aesthetics.
So
yeah.
they look at the facade of the place, and then
Not the bare bones.
correct. They should be looking at the more urgent things. There was an interesting study that was done about how far property buyers tend to buy property from their place of work, and you'd be surprised. It's within 9 kilometers. So you have a maybe you have a property that's cheap and near to an MRT station in Sungai Buloh, for example, but you're working in KL, and you can take the MRT down to KL, but the exact connectivity, because KL you're looking at a huge place, right?
Yeah.
The area of KL is what, 720 square kilometers.
234, 243 if I'm not mistaken, square kilometers.
So it's a huge area. So yeah, you might be able to go down to KL Central and get off there, but where is your connectivity from there to your workplace, right? So from my own experience, for me to get to work, if I use public transportation, it will take me an hour.
Driving will take you?
Driving will take me during peak hours. Driving will take me 25 minutes.
Right.
If there's hardly any cars, 15 minutes will do. So you save 45 minutes,
Yeah.
basically, right?
And that
So-
45 minutes is crucial for one's sanity
correct
these
yeah.
days with our traffic jams.
Can I add something to this, Joseph? Sorry to interrupt. My sister bought a property somewhere in Dengkil, and she works in. I'm sorry, if my sister is listening. I'm sorry that I'm talking about you, but she works somewhere. She works in the central area in KL, and when she bought the property, it was a landed property with 3-bedroom. I think 1,200 square feet. I think about 400,000, 450,000. I think. And my mom was very insistent that I also buy a property in the same area. She said it's a big area, it's landed property, it's it's huge area. But my biggest concern at the time was the distance, because even though I think it's very near Cyberjaya, and so that there is an MRT there. So I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, when I went, I slept at her house, and then I got to work from I commuted from her house to the office. It took me about 1 hour 15 minutes, 1 hour 20 minutes. If I had driven, it would be about maybe 45 minutes. But either way, and during peak hours, the commute time could easily take up to 2 hours. I remember during Ramadan, I was driving home from office, it was about 2 hours. So I felt like people tend to overlook this aspect, because you keep in mind, when you buy a property, I mean, unless you want to rent out, but if you are planning to live there, you're going to be living there for the next 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
And this is the amount of time you're going to waste every day, your petrol, your tool,
Your sanity.
so your sanity, your back pain. These are the costs that you don't see now,
Yeah.
but you will incur over the years because of the decision you make now.
Yeah, that I think that's also important. Are you buying the property for investment or for you to live in? Right?
And most first-time homeowners, they're actually buying for their own stay, right? Because obviously they need a roof over their heads. So if they're looking for their own stay, then they must look into the conveniences rather than the facade, what the place can offer you. Yeah, you have a bigger house, it's a landed property, but the distance you need to travel every day.
Is
to
it
work.
worth it?
Yeah, correct. So, I mean, KL is still not as bad as some overseas nations. If you were in Bangkok, the traffic is immensely crazy that
Worse
side.
than us.
Correct. The same thing with Indonesia as well. I had, even though the airport was so near to the hotel that I was staying, and because the international flight, you have to give about 3 hours, and then they give another 3 more hours just to get to the airport, just in case you get into a jam. You have that kind of aspect.
But,
So
but since you mentioned cities like Bangkok, their public transport is
it's
quite
still,
good, right? The trains.
no. They do have public transportation, but it's not quite as good, obviously, as Singapore.
Right.
Singapore is quite well wired. Bangkok still falls behind. But having said that, I have to say Malaysia is improving. If they come in with the MRT3, I think that would
Greatly
encourage me
improve
to
more,
take
yeah.
public transportation as well.
Do you have access to a train where you live, Joseph?
No, I have to take a bus down to KL Central and then from there MRT to
I
Filial.
see. So what you discovered is the drive from your place to the office is not really a problem.
Yeah,
Like you said, it's
I would rather
25
drive.
minutes, okay.
I'd rather drive than take public transportation. But having said that, I'm quite a public transportation person. I will advocate for it. And first time home buyers, if you, like I said, don't look at the wrong things, look at the right things. So if you're gonna buy a place, make sure that it clicks all the right boxes. Don't look at the wrong things, because that will backfire on you later on. So that's the third pitfall.
Okay.
So the fourth pitfall is forgetting about the hidden costs. Because when they buy homes, they think, oh no, I saved up enough for the 10% deposit, and then the rest will be covered by the bank loan. But nothing is absolute. Bank loans doesn't necessarily mean they will automatically give you a 90% loan.
Correct.
It really depends on your
Credit.
your credit rating and how much you're earning. So you might not get the 90% loan. Although for first home buyers, I'm not sure whether you're aware of this, but there's a lot of areas where you can look into it. The government provides some incentive for first home buyers. So I think last time they had something called Kagamas that help with the 10% loan. But now if you buy directly from the developer, they can arrange for you to get they'll provide a 10% discount, for example. So you still can apply for the bank loan, and then because of the 10% discount, if the bank loan gives you 90%, that covers your dilemma of trying to look for, not saving up for the deposit.
10% discount off the 10% down payment.
No, 10%. Let's say a place is $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
So some developers offer you 10% discount. So if you apply for $500,000 loan, the 10% is already discounted. So the bank gives you 90%. So straight away you don't have to worry about 10% anymore, right? So there are things like this that you can look for. So if it works out for on your benefit, check out what are the areas that you can actually minimize your deposit.
What's the fifth pitfall, Joseph?
The fifth pitfall is forgetting about the cost of ownership. So
But,
the hidden costs are going back.
Yeah, we have to go back to that.
So if you talk about hidden costs, the things like legal fees,
Stamp
your
duty,
MRT, your
yeah.
stamp duties, your disbursement fees,
Valuation fees.
those are your hidden costs. Because when developers sell you a property, they don't tell you about that part, right? So the other costs of ownership are the things like if you buy strata development now, any strata title development, you will have to pay maintenance and sinking fund, right? You have to think about renovation, because you are buying a bare unit, especially for new homes, you're buying a bare unit. If you buy a secondary home, sometimes there are already furniture inside there.
You mean subsale?
Subsale, yes.
Yeah.
So for the subsale, it depends on the owner. Sometimes they want to sell as is. Everything in there, you can have
Yeah.
it. So furniture wise, everything else already you already minimize that cost. But for a primary home, most developers will sell property that's a bare unit. So it means there's nothing in there, your fixtures are not there yet.
But
So-
bare unit also comes with come with your kitchen cabinets.
Not all.
Not all, correct,
Not
some.
all.
Yeah.
It depends on the developer. Some developers put there partially furnished. So when they put there partially furnished, it's normally the kitchen sink is there.
Right.
They'll give you a cabinet. Some developers will give you air conditioning. Some developers will give you the points to put. The holes have been done already for you to install your air conditioning. The toilet fixtures are all there. So it's a fully functioning toilet when you go in there. Bathroom fixtures are all there already. So those are the partially furnished unit. It like I said, it really depends on the developer. If you are lucky, you can find one that gives you a lot more. In my case, I was quite lucky. My unit came with the kitchenette, the stove, the refrigerator, the washing machine, and then all I need to bring in was just basically my furniture. So
Okay.
everything is functioning. The toilet, everything is all fixtures done already. So some developers will give you a fully furnished. So it naturally, if it's a fully furnished, the price is always higher.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what you're looking at. But going back to the cost of ownership, you also need to pay for your assessment fees.
Yeah.
You know, you pay the council, right?
Quit rent, yeah.
That's right. So all those things, a lot of people, when they buy a home, they don't realize that there's a lot of other things that you need to pay for.
Yeah,
as
your
a
yearly fire
homeowner.
insurance.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. That's a lot to consider, Joseph. But we also we want to move this conversation a little bit into other factors to consider. Those are the financial factors that we need to consider. But we at Star Metro, we also know that there are also social factors that we have to consider when buying a property. I like to say that when you buy a property, you're not just buying a property, you're buying a place to live, and in some cases you're buying neighbors.
Correct.
You want to know that you'll be living in an area where hopefully there's minimal drama, but there are so many things to consider, like the JMB, the MC, how well they're gonna do, how well they're gonna do, how much the maintenance fee is gonna cost every month, and I think we want to dive into that a little bit more. But maybe Aida or Joseph, maybe you guys can tell us a bit more about what are the concerns that we need to take into account when we're buying a property, landed, strata, not just economic and financial concerns, but other concerns like maybe social factors that we have to take into account.
Yeah, that one interesting you mentioned about neighbors. You cannot control your neighbors. That's unfortunate. If you buy a primary property, so it's just been finished building, you don't know who your neighbors are.
Yeah.
So
It's a gamble.
it's a kind of a gamble. It's not like if you're buying a subsale secondary home, you can actually go and inspect, right? So I always tell people, if you're gonna buy a secondary home subsale, go and see the place at night when everybody has reached home.
Yeah. See what your neighbors are like.
And just don't go on one day. You go on different days, different time. So if you go during the daytime, everybody's at work or they're in school, so you don't hear the noise. You think there's a quiet area. But when you go back at night, and then suddenly you see all these cars parked at the side of the road, and there's no parking for you, and you have inconsiderate neighbors where they park directly in front of your home, so you cannot even go into your own park space.
Okay,
because
so you're talking about landed property.
correct.
Okay, we'll get to the high rise after
High
this.
rise is a different thing.
Yeah.
So in landed properties, you can see the area and see what your neighbors are like. So in high rise area, again the same thing. The only problem with high rise is that it's normally has security.
Yeah.
So security guard will not allow you to go in. But you can give a quick estimation from the outside already before you actually even go in. If you know somebody who is living in the apartment itself, complex itself, then you can always approach that person
Yeah.
and ask them what it's like. So if it's if it's upsell, ask to view the place in the evening when people have reached home, because then you can hear the surrounding sound, whether it's noisy or not, what your neighbors are going to be like. Then it gives you a better indication.
That's a very important point. Yep.
Like I said, primary homes, no control. You just have to grin and bear it and pray that your neighbors are good.
I'm a bit paranoid nowadays. You know, when I remember when I was buying a property, when I was looking to buy a property, I was looking at the whether it's a flood prone area. I was looking at whether it was close to like a TNB pylon or something, and then I would even went the extra mile when I remember I was looking at this property somewhere in Puchong, I think, and I remember going through the Subang Jaya local plan. You know, like local councils, they have these plans where they publish, you know, the zones, the type of lands, and what sort of projects they might plan for the area in the future. So I think a lot of home buyers probably don't go that far.
We do because it's on our table.
It's
Yeah.
what we do at Star Metro. But I
Yeah.
remember like when my sister bought a house in Dengkil, in Cyber South, somewhere between Dengkil and Cyberjaya, I saw a huge plot of land there, and there was like a huge, I say pond or lake. Then I asked her, do you know what the state government or who is the owner of this land and what they're going to do with it? And she said she doesn't know. Then I said, you better find out, because I don't know. Your area seems like a low-lying area to me, and that lake seems like, you know, it could come in handy during rainy seasons, and you might want to keep it there to act as a sponge, you know, for excess water. Because my concern is what happens if, you know, things get developed, you know, what happens in the future. So I always have that fear, what's going to happen 20, 30 years down the line, you know. You want to make sure that, and you want to make sure that the property you buy is safe. And with the recent, I think the recent incident at Putra Heights, that to me has added another thing I will be looking into when I buy a property. I would be like, wait,
Is it near a gas
is it
pipeline?
near a gas pipeline?
Yeah.
And if it is, then I want to make sure that there are safety measures in place so
Yeah.
that I don't, you know, accidents don't happen. And if they do happen, what's going to happen to me?
Okay, yeah, it's interesting that I mentioned that. Yes, any property that you plan to buy in, do your due diligence. It boggles my mind because I find a lot of families buy into a flood zone.
Unknowingly.
Yeah, I wouldn't say whether it's unknowingly or not, because I do have friends when they were buying homes, and I advise them, I say, hey, you know, you're buying into a flood zone area. If I were you, I wouldn't buy. And then they went ahead and purchased it. And then they said, oh no, but the developer has made all these drainage to make sure that the water flow, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, it's cheap, and then I can afford a landed home. And I said, time will tell.
Wow. And here's the other thing. Here's the other thing, right?
So you know, people who has expertise and pre-warn you, you should take that, you know, as a big consideration.
Yeah.
Especially somebody who's been in the industry for a long time. So
So Joseph, when you offer your expertise, they know that you have been in the industry
Yes,
for a long time, and they still don't listen.
yes,
Oh
they,
dear.
they turn a blind eye, they turn a deaf ear, and suddenly, one fine day, when the high tide was up and then the heavy rain came down, and the water rose up into their home,
Oh dear.
and they were all asleep. So everything downstairs was just flooded. It wasn't just a minor flood; it was 3 feet.
Wow.
It's like 3 feet of water in their home. And then after that, they all cry, "Oh no, no, it's gonna rain, flooded. My home is destroyed." Blah blah blah. And I looked at them. I just thought, do I want to pour salt and vinegar to this? But I didn't. I just looked at them. I thought, yeah, you are living in the flood zone. And then it clicked. They said, "Oh yeah, last time you warned me that this is a flood area," but it's a bit too late.
I think
Wow.
people tend to forget, you know, maybe that vacant land is vacant for now, but it won't be that forever. And
Correct.
you're gonna have to. This is why I always tell people: read the paper, know what's happening around you, and when councils want to make changes, by law they are required to publish that information,
Correct.
and they do call you for
In the local plan,
town
yeah.
hall and all that. So you better know what you are signing up for.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's no longer you look into a 10, 20-year flood area. It's now 100 flood years on, you have to look way beyond that, especially with our changing climate
Yeah.
and the rising sea levels. I mean, like, we all are aware of this already. So when they buy a home, yeah, just because it's cheap and fits your criteria, but you have to make sure that this is going to be your home.
Exactly.
You
And
have to protect it, right?
correct. And comes my next point. Landed or strata. When I grew up in a landed house in Penang. I love living in a house. Right. Who doesn't? If you grew up in a landed property. When I moved to Klang Valley, when I first moved here, I sought shelter with my oldest sibling in their rented house in Subang Jaya. Lived there for 4 years, and I eventually moved out on my own to an apartment because for me, I thought that security is crucial because you're a single person, you're going in and out, right? You want extra security. And at that time, I was a victim of a snatch theft at knife point, right? So that fear affected me. So, I told myself, okay, I'm going to move on my own. I have to look at high rise. I don't think I want to, at that time, rent a room in a landed property because that security thing just put a lot of fear in me. Yeah. So until today, I know we do hear of people saying like, oh, it's better to get landed property. It's why are you buying high rise? I look for landed property. See, the thing is, right, as a single person, I would prefer the security of a condo.
Okay, I'm gonna have to correct you there a bit. Strata properties versus landed, right? You were saying, strata property can be a landed property, right? So, a lot of people get confused. They think that landed is gonna be non-strata. So basically, we're looking at two things here: non-strata and strata development. Now, if you're concerned about safety and whether things is gonna happen to you or not, which a lot of people are, because Malaysia's crime rate is actually quite high. So when a lot of people buy into strata management, safety is taken into consideration because it's gated. You have to go through security to get in, so it minimizes your crime happening to you. Anything untoward that might happen to you, it does minimize it. But landed can be a strata management as well, because you have landed gated and guarded properties, and it's spread over a wider area, and it really depends on how the property is also managed. There's quite a number of gated and guarded property where they actually have guards patrolling the area, and they set up CCTV strategic points to make sure that there was no illegal entry. So they do minimize the any robbery or theft cases within a strata area. So I think it's quite proven that strata development, you see fewer crime cases. That's a given, but it doesn't. Don't let that false sense of security get to you, because at the end of the day, just because it's strata property and you have your security in place, if a crime is going to happen, a crime is going to happen, right? So it really depends. There was a 5-star level property that was in KL. This was a few years back when we were writing on this story. At that time, Airbnb was quite the rage of the time, and this property, even though it's high end, was actually offered on Airbnb. And what happened was that these kidnappers, they took the Airbnb so they can enter this high end place in order to kidnap some people.
Gosh, that is scary.
So that actually boiled down to how safe are you actually, right? So at the end of the day, you still need to take extra precaution even though you're within a strata management. Like I said, strata management has less crime, you have better security, but it's not foolproof. And the CCTV will only record, it doesn't save you.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, Joseph, I'm sorry that we have to move the conversation along, but another topic that we want to delve into is the difference between freehold and leasehold land, because this is something that always gets brought up when people buy a property. Maybe you can tell us the pros and cons of each, and how does that factor into buying decisions?
Okay, I'll have to say a lot of properties now are moving into the leasehold criteria. But interestingly enough, old PJ, some of the properties that were originally freehold but were converted into leasehold when it was developed are now being reconverted back into freehold. So I'm not sure. I think it really depends on the person. I actually bought leasehold,
Mine too.
not freehold. The reason being, I wanted to be nearer to the city, so a lot of the properties within the city area tend to be leasehold. So if you want freehold, yeah, it's giving you what 999 years, right? Basically, are you going to live that long? Is your next generation going to
You mean leasehold? You mean
maintain the same
leasehold?
place, right? Sorry.
Leasehold.
No, for freehold. For freehold is there's no limit to it. For leasehold is 99 years, right? So 99 years, obviously my lifetime will be met. But the next generation, then they have the option of renewing the leasehold.
Yeah, that time when it's up for you to renew the leasehold, that's another subject altogether, because we've covered stories like this
Yeah.
extensively. Yeah.
So whether freehold or leasehold, it really depends on the buyer's perception. So I have to say, if you can buy a property to stay and it's just you, does it matter that it's freehold?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because by the time you expire, the leasehold probably isn't up yet because it's 99 years. Obviously at 50 plus, I still have 80 years of my leasehold.
Yes.
I'm not gonna live that long.
When I bought my property, Joseph, I found out that the project sits on a commercial land.
Yeah, let's get
And,
into that. Commercial versus residential land.
I found out then that this means that the water tariffs, electricity tariffs, will be different will be more expensive compared to properties on residential land. And I also found out that apparently if you buy a property on a commercial land, you can apply from TNB to convert your electricity tariff. Provide you have to. I mean, there's a whole process where you have to apply, but I looked it up online. Apparently, a number of people have done it, so it's doable. But for water tariffs, I mean, I still have to. Apparently, I still have to apply, I still have to pay to the MC. So maybe you can explain a little bit about that, Joseph. Residential and commercial land.
The property I bought is actually on commercial land, but the apartments that was built on top of the retail area has been converted to residential. So here's the thing: if you buy purely on residential land, yes, automatically you get residential electric bill, your water as well residential, even your quick rent, it's on residential rate. Now, if you buy on commercial land, even though the property on top of the commercial area has been designated as residential, so it means what my developer had done is when we moved that time, they had already convert the rates for us. So the water I'm paying and the electricity I'm paying is residential rate. So there are some development where you buy into commercial area, but its commercial rate is up to you to go to TNB and go to the water board and request for it to be converted to residential.
Okay,
And
this sounds very complicated, Joseph. Does this also include the service residence?
Yes.
Okay.
So, like I said, in the case of my apartment, it's service residence title, but the developer had already converted everything for us.
To residential.
So we didn't have to do anything. So that was a good thing about the developer that we bought the property off from, is that they went ahead and did that all for us. So we didn't have to go through the trouble of individually going to TNB and changing it. But it's possible. Yeah, you can change it back to residential rate, except for the quick rent. The quick rent will still be commercial because we went to DBKL and requested for the assessment rates to be reduced, which they did reduce for us. Initially, we had to pay in the case of my apartment, was over $1,000, but they reduced it down to 900. So there was some reduction. You can request for it, but there's an interesting thing here that I discovered when we requested for the rates to be reduced, in that in a commercial title, if you own a 2-bedroom place, you are paying higher rates than a 3-bedroom place.
Why is that?
We actually questioned DBKL, and DBKL said it's because your apartment is easier to rent and you can rent at a higher rental. And I said, but that apartment is not for me to rent out, it's for me to stay in. It's a residential place, it's not a commercial place for me to rent out. But they said no, so they turned us down. So interestingly enough, the bigger apartment is paying lower rates. I mean, they still pay a big amount because it's a bigger square feet. But in terms of square feet, because they charge by square feet, by square feet, the price I'm paying for my apartment is higher. That's another interesting thing, right?
I feel like I've heard about that, but now I'm.
We actually wrote about it before, so it's floating in StarProperty news.
Yes, please check that out. When was that, Joseph?
This was some time back. I think it might be 3 years ago.
Okay. So when we talk about residential versus commercial land, right? Is it true that newer developments are being built on commercial land?
More.
No, it can be built on a residential. They need to apply with the council, because a lot of developers tend to build mixed development when it comes to high rise now, and because of the commercial aspect below the apartments, they have to apply for the conversion into commercial.
I see. Okay.
So I don't know whether that you've given me an idea to look into, is that if it's a residential land that's been converted into commercial for the aspect of the mixed development, what happens to the residents who are staying on top of the mixed development? Are they paying residential rate, or whether they are paying commercial rate just because of the conversion?
That would be an important aspect to look into for future property owners. Let's go back again to the leasehold properties. If the lease is close to expiry, what should the current or future owners do?
Okay, if it's a new development by the developer, when they build the development, they will have already applied with the council to extend it back to 99 years, minus the construction time period lah. But if it's a secondary home, if you buy off a subsale and it's a leasehold, up to a certain number of years, you probably won't be able to get a bank loan. I cannot remember what was the number of years that's remaining that they would disregard the bank loan. That one you have to, if you're buying, you have to check on that. But you can apply for the council. I think falling back to due diligence again, go and check with the council, see whether you can extend the leasehold if you do buy into that property. Because you don't know. The council might have a pre-plan to redevelop the area. So if you're buying into the area with a leasehold time period that is only let's say 30 years left, and they want to redevelop into something else, then that might shorten the lifespan the time that you have to stay in that location that you're bought into.
Joseph, this probably won't come to pass for me, but it might come to pass for other people. What happens if your property happens to sit on a leasehold land that is expiring, and maybe the state government has said we would like to redevelop this area? Would you, because you own the structure on top of that land, are you entitled to anything? Or I don't know how this works.
This one I think we're gonna have to discuss another time.
Okay, it's a big topic on its own.
It's a very big topic. A lot of things to consider. Even though the government might not be planning to redevelop the area, there were some properties from my experience that the leasehold was expiring. I'll have to say the residents of that township was actually very lucky, because the expiry of the leasehold coincidentally timed close to the election time period. So the government said, oh yeah, we'll come in, we'll help you, and then they actually had their leasehold renewed at a reasonable price. So they didn't have to pay excessively, so they were lucky. But hearing other development as well where the leasehold was expiring, they applied for the leasehold to be renewed, and so far I don't hear any blowbacks from those incidences.
Any parting thoughts for it before we end?
Oh no,
podcast?
there's something
you
else.
Still have some more? Okay.
Yeah, the advice. One major advice is when they apply for a bank loan, don't go for 35 years just because you are getting a lower monthly installment repayment.
Oh yes, please explain on that, Joseph.
So let's say if you take half a $1,000,000 loan, 500,000, 35 years you'll be paying back 3,021 for your monthly installment. In opposed to 20 years, you're paying 3,728. Okay, so actually did a quick calculation. 20 years you're paying 3,007. 25 years you're paying 3,002. 30 years you're paying 3,001, and then 35 years, you're paying about 3,000. But if you can afford it, I will always encourage, because I had a friend who went through this, and I actually calculated for him. In the end, he went for 25 years instead of 35 years. Because at 35 years, he will have to pay a total of 1.2 million basically for when they finish paying for the property. So if you minus off the 500,000, which was the value of the loan that they took, they are paying in excess of 768,000.
Wow.
So if you take the 25 years for the same amount, you're paying basically 1 million for the entire thing. But if you minus off the 500,000 which you are applying for the loan, you're paying basically another 500,000. So the difference between the 25 years and 35 years, you're looking at 260,000 difference.
That's a lot.
And
That's a big
that's a lot,
amount.
yeah, because that is interest.
Yeah.
So if you extend your loan further up, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's better for you, because you're paying a lot more money.
It's better for the bank.
Yeah, it's good for the bank because the bank will be earning good money, but it's not good for you because you'll be paying so much more in interest. And then the difference between the 25 years and 35-year loan was only 300, which was what he could afford. But the amount of savings that you get is a lot better. Okay, and then just a quick one on the why Gen Y and Gen Z are hesitating to buy
Yes,
property.
tell us.
Four main reason is because one, they build up a debt due to their spending. If you notice, before COVID and after COVID, the spending is a lot different. What happened was that the COVID spurred the online shopping. It increased that. So there's a lot more credit card spending. So if you look at 2017, I think, the amount that they would spend was 0.78 billion, right? To jump up to 2025, you are now spending 8.8 billion.
Goodness.
So
surprised.
out of the 8.8 billion that you are spending, 3.87 billion is actually on credit card. So you actually increase that credit card spending. So you have created a debt for yourself. So when you want to apply for a loan, it
Your
becomes
credit
difficult.
is bad.
Correct. So it's harder for them to apply for loan. Also, the lending requirements for bank has also become more strict. And because you have already created that kind of debt in your credit card, then you compound it by having the toughest difficulty in applying for loans. So that compounds the problem. Also, the housing concepts for Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z is different. They all have different needs.
What do you mean housing concepts?
Well, Gen Y, we tend to look at bigger homes. Now they want the room because Gen X tend to have more kids, right? Gen Y took a later stage in getting married. So marriage in the Gen X time was you're looking about the 20s, but the Gen Y you're looking at 30s onward. So when they do get married at the age, the number of kids that they have is also reduced. So like my family, there were 6 kids. There were 6 of us. And that was during my father's time. Now you're looking at maybe 1-2 kids. So the house requirement size might not be as great.
Right.
And then the Gen Zs right now, they are only entering the market.
Yeah, which is why we can see in certain residential areas like Bangsa, for example, the big bungalows so hard to sell They're
Correct.
not selling because no one wants to buy those big houses anymore.
And also at a kind of price,
Yeah.
the Gen Zs and Gen Ys
They
cannot
can't afford
it.
that. Yeah.
So the Gen Zs have a tendency of looking into smaller units. So different preferences. So the how quick the developer can get the information they require in order to build what they need. So there's always the problem with time. So by the time you get the information, which unfortunately Malaysia is quite slow in getting the data they require. So by the time the developers react to it, and it takes like 4 years, 5 years to construct a place, for example, then you have a longer duration time period. Then the Gen Zs are they want a place to stay already, and if it's gonna take 4 years for them to build a place, they'll sooner rent at this stage, unless they can find a place that's already been built, which probably explains why the overhang has also decreased, because a lot of the overhang were actually service apartments, smaller units, so that appeal to the Gen Y and the Gen Z. So when they started buying after the MCO, we saw the overhang reduce.
Okay.
There's a lot to think about.
There
It's
is
a lot
there
to
is-
digest,
there's, buying a home, like you said, it's not just one hurdle. It's like multiple hurdles
Multiple hurdles.
that you have to jump over. So
Yeah.
it's quite daunting. Definitely very
is.
daunting.
It is.
Even from a person who's covering development for a long time, it's still daunting for me. When I bought my second property, it's especially for investment. That was still daunting for me. So it doesn't matter what age you're in or what stage you're in, whether you're a first home buyer, second buyer, even for seasoned investors. At the end of the day, one very, very important message: do your due diligence.
Yeah. And last bit from me is when you're buying property to rent out, that's a whole new kettle of fish where
Oh, we
your
can do another
tenants,
show on
we'll
that.
do another show on tenants from nowhere you want to go.
Yeah.
Definitely, because you have good tenants and you have nightmare tenants.
Correct. Yeah. We'll do another episode on that.
Yes.
Farid, any last words?
I hope this episode has been helpful to people out there. I know for a fact it has been for me, because even though I've bought a property, I still found new information today.
Correct. We learn new things every day, and it's a ongoing thing. It doesn't stop.
Yes.
Right.
That one I have to admit, there is no end to the things that you discover. Even from all the years I've been covering in this industry, I still find new things that boggles my mind. So yeah, but the most important thing is still do your homework. Even if you do your homework, you will find that
There's
you'll
some
miss out on certain
loopholes,
things.
yeah.
You can't. It's impossible to cover everything. But if you do find a place that you like, and you manage to get a loan that is reasonable, I mean you're already on the right path.
Thank you, Joseph, for spending time with us today on this insightful conversation. Look out for our podcast, which will be on www.starmetro.com.my and the Star Online, and on YouTube. Thank you for watching, everyone.